All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to Table Talk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bella Gamer, with my co-host Glue Boy.
Hello, hello.
And my lighting is terrible because it is just so dreary out here today. So I'm gonna fix that real quick. But today we have an interesting topic. We're gonna be talking about narrative combat versus tactical combat, and how I think the idea that these are it's just a bad naming convention, because I definitely think narratively you can have tactical situations, and I would say even more in narrative you would need to have tactics if you're trying to do anything other than just dress up what your actions were.
Yeah, it's one of those like tabletop terms that is a line in the sand that doesn't really exist for a lot of things. Like it's not a mutually exclusive.
Yeah, well, I think even more than that, I think that there is generally a problem with tabletop as it currently stands, because tabletop, generally speaking, doesn't really give players like a motivation to try to like tell a story with the combat. Like Pathfinder, you don't really feel like you need to, because the rules kind of do everything for you. There's no incentive to do things kind of outside of the confines of the game. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, of course. We'll let some people hop in. Today is a different starting time for our stream. So why don't we go ahead and first just do a little small talk. What's been up with you, Alex?
Well, as according to our new schedule, I am finally working night. So we're gonna be doing our earlier hours. Hopefully that has more people with the opportunity to come in, because I know we have a handful of people that swing in like literally in the last 10-15 minutes.
Yeah.
So like maybe that'll catch them.
I do
Other
know we
than
have
that,
people in other countries who would
yeah.
like to watch, but it's always at like midnight where they're at.
So hey, it's at like I don't know, that's 4 hours before. So
Yeah.
it's at least like in the night. That's not horrible. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting. It's also gloomy as hell where I'm at. So it's just dark and wet. It's great. So I've just been prepping for that.
Yeah. I have a baby. that's my life right now currently. It feels unfortunate because I would like to do just more with the channel in general. I get so little time to myself that it's either I work all day raising a baby and then immediately go to working on a YouTube channel, or I work all day raising a baby and then I get to play games for a couple hours in the day just to relax.
Yeah, it's like that type of schedule is always rough. It's not the same at all, because one is confined to like a certain amount of time a lot more than a baby is. But like, it is that thing that kind of sucks sometimes, where it's all right. I just worked all day, long shift. Now let me go home and do work too.
Yeah,
Because it
job
sucks when you have
two.
to do that even for like just to make ends meet. Like that sucks.
Yeah,
And the only benefit is at least YouTube's basically elective. Like I'm choosing to do this to myself. I could theoretically stop at any time.
yeah. Well, and to be fair, being a parent as well, and especially being the stay-at-home, I have to deal with the baby like at night.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not even like off when I get back on baby duty after, my wife gives me a couple of hours. I just go back on baby duty again until the next day, the next evening, pretty much. And like last night, my daughter has had some like spurts of where she just has like a lot of nightmares through the night. She'll wake up crying, even though she's sleeping with us. And it's just common for babies. You know, their brains are developing, and some babies just have more trouble sleeping at night than others. But I'm the one who has to deal with it because my wife, you know, she works in the mornings, and so I have to tend to the baby, and then I do that, and then wake up, and then you know do stuff with the baby all day, and you can't really take your eyes off a baby to do anything extensively. So I can't do anything really when I'm watching her,
Yeah,
especially because our daughter loves to climb. You might even be able to see her.
yeah. The
No,
that
she's not
picture
there.
you sent behind the window.
Yeah, she loves that window behind me.
I mean, it's a fun vantage point.
It is.
I can't blame her.
So yeah, you know, I do want to make content again, but I've just been focusing on mental health, and that's just kind of what you got to do when you have a baby. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Not too much more. Though I am excited because Where Winds Meet drops tomorrow, and
True. I gotta pre-download that.
I am going to play it as soon as I can, which probably won't be until like 4:30. But it launches at 2 p.m., so I'm not really missing all too much. But I'm super
That
excited.
sucks for me actually, because then
You don't get
I
much
get
time
like
before
2
work.
hours.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I get less than an hour because I go to work at 3. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's whatever. You know, things will things will work out, and it'll be there when you get back.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like it's not anything I'd be hung up about. If they dropped it at noon our time, I'd be happy. It's like, ah, hell,
Where Winds Meet is like an
I can at
open
least try it out a
world
little bit.
wuxia style action RPG. But it has lots of like social and multiplayer elements. Like you can essentially do the main campaign with up to 3 other friends. And then there's an MMO mode, which is mostly a social mode, though there are dungeons and raids specifically for the MMO mode. And it's a game that's very immersive and open world. There's a lot of just non-combat things you can do in the game. Some of the jobs you can do, in addition to just being a cool wuxia warrior, is like being a doctor or being an orator. You know, there's also like a bodyguard job, I guess, and then I think there's like a mason or something kind of job.
There's an architect, a merchant, a ferryman, yeah, doctor, orator, bodyguard. Those are at least the jobs I found on the wiki. Because I was just
Yeah.
curious. I mean, it seems like it's a weapon-based class system instead of I am the swordman, I am the mage.
Yes, exactly. The weapons do have like a tank DPS and healing roles that you can fit into, but you can mix and match weapons as you want. And there's also the Mystic Arts, which are kind of like additional abilities that you can stack onto your own character to change up how your build is. And so there's a lot of variety because the talent points you put into your weapons change how the weapons work, in addition to the Mystic Arts that can change even more how your kit works. And you can really customize your preferences. It's not like the most fantasy or style like RPG game, you know. Uh it's more like, imagine if Sekiro or you know Elden Ring gave you talents for weapons, and also you can use like your item wheel for other abilities like Ashes of War, you know, stuff like that. So it's really interesting, and I'm excited for like an immersive kind of game that allows me to play with my friends and just enjoy some good old wuxia stuff. Wuxia's so rare in the West, and it's so interesting. So
I am looking forward to a hopefully it hits this vibe really strong, like a really fun cultivation wuxia game that isn't a weird janky mess. Because there are 2 games I know of that hit that simulation style wuxia game, and they're really strange. not
Yeah.
the best translated, and so open it turns into like a jumbled mess.
Well, from what I know, because this has been out in China for like a year now, it's really very popular. So I think it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I'm excited because we have a friend who really likes wuxia stuff, and I like wuxia stuff, so it'll be something for us to play together.
Yeah, it's like this gives me the same vibes as Crimson Desert, if you've kept up with that. Um
Uh,
where like the game
kind
looks
of.
insane. I mean, in the way that it looks very ambitious and insane.
Yeah.
And if it hits all of it, then hype. This one at least has all the pre-news for Crimson Desert has been like also really hype. It's people being like, "Oh my god, the game functions. It runs good somehow." And the most complaints that game has received is people saying it's too much like a fighting game, and that immediately gets me hyped
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's based on the same. It's
because
based
I
on.
want an action RPG where I have to lab combos. Black
Yeah, it's
Desert.
based on Black Desert, and Black Desert had very like uh tech fighting style game combat in it. Honestly, Black Desert is probably one of the best MMOs to ever exist. The only problem is terrible monetization practices in it.
Yeah, I've straight up never tried it. It looks wild.
It's a real crazy game. I think it has the best combat I think of any MMO, and there's a lot to do in the game, but it's also like a style of game that is all about like grinding for hours and hours and hours to do stuff. And some people are like that, other people don't. I'm not a big fan of like grinding, and then it has terrible monetization where you improve items by using materials and money in game to like combine things, but you can buy these items that make it more likely that your uh, item improvement succeeds.
Uh
And if you're after a certain point, if your item crafting fails, your item breaks. So it really motivates people to spend a lot of money on these crafting material things that are supposed to make it easier. So it's sad. It's sad because there are really good MMOs that really could have dethroned World of Warcraft if they were just run by better companies and had better strategies overall. And I don't think
the
Where
only
Winds Meet is going to
one
really
I
beat that. It's just not an
I don't think so.
MMO.
The only one I see that has like done anything to shake up the Warcraft throne was like Guild Wars 2. But that's just like cuz at least the brief bit I've touched that game, it seems like it's got way better monetization, isn't ran by Blizzard with a lot of the same things you'd get out of World of Warcraft.
Couldn't you just play Path of Exile 2? I mean, I love Path of Exile 2, but I'm not seeing the comparison.
I mean, it's a different game. Like one's an ARPG, the other is like an MMO.
Well, an ARPG is a bad term because it also just refers to different types of games. Because they're both ARPGs. Like Elden Ring is an ARPG, but they're not the same kind of ARPG.
I don't know. Whenever I hear ARPG, I'm like, Diablo, because that's just where it's used.
That's because that's like what that genre like claims, and a lot of other games use like open world RPG as a like the terms they'll use, but ARPG just means action RPG game. So it's not turn based. It's not anything like that. You hit buttons and you attack people. But yeah, they're not the same kind of game. So, And I love Path of Exile too. I wish I had more time to play it. That's a more grindy game than being a dad allows for. But I'm excited for the next expansion. It's gonna bring the Druid. That's coming up soon, I think. There's been some
December.
announcements, but I've missed it.
It's gonna be like either the first or second week of December.
Did I say June? I'm dumb. I meant to say December.
Yeah, no, it's they just put out the announcement that they're going to make announcements.
But yeah, so I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good time at the very least. You know, for the few hours a day I can manage to get on and play with my friends. And who knows? You know, it's like what if Elden Ring had better multiplayer? And that sounds awesome.
Yeah, like I love a lot of very weird, obtuse games. A lot of times it's done by Japanese devs who have a very specific like idea in mind. I'm a Kojima simp, so I can't. I'm a hypocrite if I say I don't like it. Uh, but like that mentality of well, I'm trying to hit the exact same feeling as when my car got stuck and someone randomly helped me get it out. Like, yeah, okay, sick. That's fun early on. I think that works in like the game of Dark Souls 1. But can we now in the year of our Lord 2025 please get normal multiplayer and not have to mod it? Cuz your game has the capacity to do this. We can do it. Apparently it was easy. So why can't this just be base game?
Yeah, yeah. Also reminds me, I cannot wait for Code Vein 2 to come out. It comes out in January.
Oh
And
yeah, I forgot about that.
that has been one of the other games, and like if it had a bigger multiplayer scene, it would have probably been my favorite Souls-like series because it just had a better, you could do builds in that game. You could do builds better than you could do builds in like anything Souls related, you know.
It definitely is on the very small list of Souls likes not made by FromSoft that is good. It is a weirdly small list for how many people try to yoink the style.
Like honestly, it's a game that I might consider going back and playing through again at some point in the future, which is very rare for me. I don't go back and play games that often, but you never know. Though to be fair, Bloodborne is also one of those games because Bloodborne is just a masterpiece as far as like Souls games are related.
Yeah, it is definitely like one of my favorites. It is like Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring are the three that I enjoy the most.
But all right, let's get into today's subject: narrative versus tactical combat. Now, last stream we were I kind of was going on a rant about narrative gameplay and how a lot of tabletop games just don't motivate players to properly describe, you know, anything. You're prompted by the game to do a check for a thing, and that's it. There's no systems, there's no feedback for players actively trying to interact with the scene and describing things, you know, like disarming a trap. That's what we talked about a lot last time. And I feel like that's a big miss. And to be fair, a lot of GMs out there are like, well, the GM can just do that. It's like, yeah, but make that a game thing. There's a lot of people out there who are playing TTRPGs, a very narrative gaming at like thing, mostly like board games with occasional conversations, you know.
It's
And
people who like learn how to play these games because they pick up a starter pack. They're not going out there and studying the craft, getting
right.
Going out finding GMs to learn from as a disciple, watching YouTube. There are people who just like, yeah, I played like D&D every week. That my friends picked up a box and we just kind of hang out. And there is an issue where if this is a common thing for your game and you have a way you want your game to be played, it's good to show off like how your system can be operated in playstyles. Just have good examples and like good things in your book that help motivate that.
But first, let's go ahead and talk about like the examples of narrative versus tactical. So tactical, I think there's a very easy one to throw out immediately is Pathfinder 2. Pathfinder 2e is By far, probably my favorite tactical game out there, though Lancer does come real close. Your positioning matters. The players on your turn have a variety of options you can do to help, make things better. You also have the 3 action system, and you have multi-attack penalties. So how you play the game matters choice by choice by choice. Even if you feel like you're playing a fighter, right? And your big thing is like attack, attack, attack. 3 attacks, even as a fighter, is still not optimal in that game. So you're better off using talents or abilities or the demoralize action to make the enemy frightened to reduce all their checks and DCs, or to try to trip an enemy so that they, if they stay on the ground, they're off guard to everyone. And if they stand up, you're a fighter and you're going to hit them for standing up. So, in Pathfinder 2e, like a tactical game is very much based on your positioning matters, your actions matter, and there are a variety of ways you can approach the same combat scenario to different effect.
I think a good hallmark of a fun tactical game is really planning out, considering what your turn can be, where you have a lot of information you can then work through to find something that'll work the best. You have a lot of tools in your kit at your disposal, and each tool feels different and useful in a different situation. It's like when you play a big old, like, very tactical CRPG. I think one of the hardest ones to playing through is Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Those games, like, really want you to, like, learn the system so you can then exploit it. Like, that is how you play that game.
Now, a narrative game, or at least how Tabletop has kind of collectively called narrative games with narrative combats, are games more like the Star Wars RPG, where it's not necessarily as nitty-gritty, and a lot of what happens in a combat scenario can be more based on how you describe a scene than it is about what's actually, like, action economy wise what you're doing. Genesis also does this, and it's relatively the same game system, where your character can run and hide behind cover. Like, there's no maps, there's no grids oftentimes for these kind of games. You just describe, all right, I'm visualizing the combat scene, I'm gonna go hide behind cover, and I'm gonna shoot at them from behind cover. And the game might have some kind of indication of a cover that you can do with your action, or maybe not, and maybe you're just going and making an attack roll, and the GM decides of being behind cover benefits you in some way or another.
Yeah, it's definitely not like 100% applicable all the time, but at least with the perception of it, tactical games are the type of games where having the most information matters. Where if we tried to do a big combat in Pathfinder Theater of the Mind, or even with Lancer, like, the combat becomes worse. It's like significantly worse, because, like, what are we doing? Positioning matters. I need to know where I am. And then, having done a decent number of combats in the Star Wars system, you don't really need it. You just know that there's this many enemies, and you have, like, some abilities for variety and different effects, but it's not the same degree as something like Pathfinder or Lancer.
Yeah. Another really good example is Monster of the Week. Monster of the Week, at the end of the day, you're fighting a monster or you're doing something to beat a monster. But the game doesn't treat the combat with the monster necessarily that differently than normal skill checks. You have weapons, and those weapons can use a variety of skills, but based on what kind of archetype your character has or what kind of abilities your character has, you can use almost any skill to attack, essentially, if you build that way.
Mm-hmm.
And what mostly happens is your level of success determines how much damage you take from the monster. Though it does mean if you don't attack the monster, unless the I don't remember what the GM is called in that game, the storyteller makes like a move or makes an event happen, technically you can't be attacked by the monster unless the GM targets you specifically with like a some kind of dangerous occurrence, in the game. In that game, there's no tactics. It's just about storytelling. What do you do in this moment that can help defeat the monster? What kind of things? I mean, when we had to fight the Look Behind, for instance, it was this monster that was very hard to pin down because it would just warp to different trees it was hiding behind or different kinds of objects. And so, you couldn't just run up and attack it, and it could just come out and swipe you from any angle. You had to pin it down somehow, and with this creature specifically, we had to like douse it in alcohol.
Yeah, it's the difference of instead of a big combat, a lot of times, especially in those very rules light systems, combat is essentially like an endeavor. It is a puzzle you are solving to get something out of it, rather than like there is fun in Pathfinder if you're like level 3 and there's 5 bandits on the road and you're outnumbered and like, all right, let's duke it out, let's fight. You can have like a lot of fun combat still in something pretty basic. At some point in a rules light, very narrative roleplay experience, at some point it gets kind of boring because all you're doing is like, I use this skill to do damage, I make this basic attack. So a lot of those combats don't feel like a combat, they feel like a big puzzle where we are taking damage or dealing damage.
Yeah. And so this is why these two kind of genres are split. Because one is, it's not about how you're doing the combat, it's about the story you're telling with the combat. And the other one is, it's how you're doing the combat. Every move matters, everything matters. Though, our good friends over at What is Tabletop did raise an interesting thing during their video. I disagreed, but I'm curious to hear what anyone thinks here. That D&D technically is more of a narrative combat than a tactical combat game.
This isn't even like I hate D&D talking point. It's just the game doesn't give you a lot of options to do that. The combat's very stand still and swing. Like how it's incentivized players to play it. It's very static.
Yeah. Now, I'll argue that it is tactical because you do have area spells. Positioning does matter.
Oh, yeah.
You can push enemies off of things, all this kind of stuff. But I did find the comment very interesting because there's no flanking. Positioning, for the most part, doesn't exist. And because the game is so simplified, any situations you could do or any abilities that, can make an enemy more vulnerable or whatever just applies advantage. So if you make the enemy sick, advantage. If you make the enemy frightened, advantage. There's no tactical differences between different types of actions for a lot of things. If what your goal is to make the enemy, not like weaker in some way, there's no differences. In Pathfinder, there are differences between things like frightened or sickened or whatever. Even though they have similar status conditions, frightened just goes away at the end of the enemy's turn, while sickened requires the enemy to use actions to vomit to get rid of the sickened condition. And some enemies can't be frightened, some enemies can't be sickened, and these kind of things just don't exist in D&D.
Yeah. And like they're very situational. Like I can't make a fear build really in D&D. Like I do agree, D&D is a tactical combat game. I don't think it does it very well.
Yeah.
But it is there because I think one of the big issues of that game that makes it feel the way it does is largely it's honestly having everything have a opportunity attack. It builds and reinforces the idea that in the game you plant your feet and you just kind of stand there and you get to your turn and you do your attack and then you go to the next turn. When in Pathfinder, that the idea of something having opportunity attack is rare. It exists, and you can sometimes guess when a creature does have it, but it instead leads to there's a lot more dynamic combat because now moving is a trade of actions. If something needs to get to you, you can utilize its movement speed to its disadvantage, like fighting zombies.
Yeah,
that one is you just need to stay mobile. But like, yeah, I don't think it makes for a good like narrative tactical combat just because what narrative options can I take? I kind of have to stand still.
yeah, and that's the interesting point as well. It's not really narrative because the only claim that Frank makes in the video that they just made recently is that it's not tactical, so thus it's narrative, and that I feel is incorrect. I mean, you could also argue that it's narrative because mostly the difference between different characters is how you're doing damage or how you're doing, whatever you're doing to enemies, rather than, like the strategies behind it. Like I use a fire spell versus an ice spell kind of thing.
It's the way of the only other one, because this I think comes up every once in a while when we're playing a game that's pretty rigid and how its rules are set up. And there's also, I think, a perception of very tactical, rule-heavy games. Is in D&D, I'd have like the freedom, because the game doesn't just have a lot holding it up, to be to really describe this sick-ass combat I'm doing, go into detail like as before I'm making the attack roll. And then in some games, you do that, and it's like, okay, so are you making a normal attack? Are you making the kick action, which is a separate action? Are you doing this action that's different? It's like, oh, no, I was flavoring something. Which can occasionally pop up. With D&D, sometimes it's lack of rules for something. That's what people say, they like it so much. It leaves enough openings for people to come up with something that they want to do at their table. That's the way I can see it. I still don't agree that it makes for like a great narrative combat. And I also don't agree that if something is not tactical, therefore it's a narrative. I think I can easily do just as narrative combat inside a Pathfinder. Even something if you're you can still do fun tactical stuff while having a combat that feels more like a puzzle, that is more like a big encounter of some challenge. Tell a really interesting story through the framework. It's just, if you play it bog standard, it's going to turn into a big old tactical map fight. But you can still have narrative in it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there's a variety of things that games can do and should emphasize that really don't come up. Like, most games do mention like objectives, something something the characters can do in the scene that's like an alternative goal, aside from just punching in the face of the enemies. The problem is that's like, okay, GMs, make it up. Make up objectives for your players to do in these kind of scenes,
and do it good, because the first question, if you add some if you're playing with people who play very gamey, at least this would be the question of, all right, is this worth doing besides just attacking?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes that's just an issue. I think it's easier to do in something like Pathfinder in that instance, because of multi-actions and there are just more frameworks for different things. Meanwhile, in D&D, you got the one attack, you got the one bonus, and you got your move. And if you get locked into an enemy, it really, really, especially with how the balancing of the game works, you are really disincentivized to ever disengage.
Yeah. And here's like the big thing, the big hurdle that comes with adding more narrative elements to more structured games like Pathfinder 2e, which is, since a rule exists, that means anything that is not a rule shouldn't exist. For instance, I want to make the enemy, I want to trip the enemy, with my action. It's like, okay, well, there's a trip action in the game. It's just like, well, yeah, but like, I position the enemy over this barrel and I want to shove him to the ground over the barrel. So I want to essentially shove and trip him, but I set it up. You know, I narratively push him here, mechanically push him here. Everything should be here, right? But should I be able to? Now, the path of it, I did it again. The Pathfinder devs will tell you, yeah, it's your game. Make up your own rules. The book has one section where it's just like the GM can make rules as they say, and then the book tells you how tripping works, how an enemy is tripped, and you know, and all this other stuff. So even though the developers of the game are like, yeah, go do, you know, if a player wants to recreate a feat, they have to work for it more, but go ahead. But the book doesn't say that.
And yeah, that was like the one bit that stuck with me the most when one of our interviews of, I feel like that should be part of the book. That should be stated, because that gives a different like use case for feats. Because I think a big aspect that hits people for narrative games is doing that, where they're like, I want to trip with my action. I have this set up. I want to do it like this. And it's like, well, what you're asking is a different action, which will then make your turn worthless.
Yeah.
Without like how the action economy is set up. Or what you're asking is a thing that exists. So because you don't have this ability from this thing, you can't do this in like the way you want. Because then the implication that there is an ability that opts you into something implies you need that to even do it in the first place. And that then disincentivizes anyone who takes that ability, like, I mean, if I can just make it up and do it whenever I want, what's the point of taking this as a level up? I can just ask the GM to take this ability in different words.
Yeah, and so how it should be done is earning your rolls. I mentioned this a lot last time, but it can't be a thing where a player is trying to mimic a feat just by describing it, right? I'm just like, well, I'm really good with my weapon, so while I'm bashing this guy in the face with my staff, I want to hook their leg and trip them in the same go, you know? Similar to the knockdown feat, or it got changed in the remaster. It's a Mauler feat. Let me look it up real quick. But essentially, that is an action that you can take where you hit them, or you strike at them, and if you hit them with the attack, then you knock them prone, essentially. So just being like, hey, I'm really good with my staff, so I'm just gonna hit them a bunch of times, hook their leg, and then knock them down. You know, that's all well and good that you're describing your action. They've called it slam down now. But you didn't earn it in any way. You're just trying to get a feat for free, more or less. So how then you should do it is you set up, you know, you have turns where you're just like, okay, hey GM, if I, you know, like I'm trying to move this guy over to the barrel I mentioned before. So if I succeed with this attack, can I like scooch him over towards the barrel? GM's like, sure, why not? Because moving the enemy towards the barrel probably isn't some huge advantageous thing, you know. It's a little bit of flair, it's a little bit of fluff that like you can then be like, okay, you succeeded, you got him over to the barrel. It's like, okay, now if I hit him really hard with this attack that pushes them back over the barrel, can it also knock them prone? Then the GM can be like, okay, sure, because you used an action to kind of get the enemy here, and you're here based on the fact that you got a success on your prior attack, you know. So you have put in a little bit extra, you've earned a little bit more to gain additional effects, more or less. But that comes with a problem. How do you know when you've earned a thing? How does the GM know when you've earned a thing? And how can a game account for every possible combat situation where a player can gain additional benefits in a combat scenario?
Yeah, it is a lot to load up on somebody. Especially if you're trying to have a game that's like super balanced. It sometimes is feeling like we'll make everything really numbers balanced and then try to tell people, all right, you can also do what you want, you can also ignore this. But
yeah,
It's a weird, tricky balance.
And so my proposition for this is to have a chart that indicates costs. If a player wants to perform an effect like tripping, for instance, then maybe they need to use certain numbers of costs to get there. Maybe the player needs to intentionally fail a check, or maybe the player needs to succeed on a difficult check. Because it's all well and good if you can convince your GM with really good storytelling to let you do a thing. I think that's fine. I think that's, a table by table thing. And sometimes the moment just calls for it to be just really, it would be really cool if this worked kind of scenario. But I feel like if tabletop integrated more this idea that players can earn certain benefits by role playing and by mechanically, like, for instance, it's a very big movie thing where the protagonist is on the back foot. They're backing away. Maybe their weapon has been disarmed, and it. Do you want to go down this road, Andrew? Because it's not going to end the way you want it to. Also, Genesis is spelled with a Y, not an I. But they're disarmed, and they're like, oh, you got me. But, this is all a ploy because they're luring the enemy into a position where then they're like, no, and someone pulls a lever and something slams into the enemy or knocks them off an edge or whatever. It's something where this is often done against an enemy who's very strong, who is almost too difficult to beat normally. And so it becomes a valid course of action because the players normally would have to have a lot more effort. But since a player, they're talking, they could be distracting the enemy. Like, hey, can I distract him with a persuasion? All this other kind of stuff. I drop my weapon to lower their guard. All these are like costs that could eventually come together to grant a really good effect. And they can be based on making good checks. Disarming your weapon, maybe not a check, but persuading them to distract them is a check.
Yeah, I think statting it out is fair because it is just that big thing of in a very tactical game. Everything's statted out, and in this, I have so many options. And then, like, sure, there's the non-action, non-standard thing that we can do story-wise, but do I just have a objectively better option? That's always that, like, struggle, that push and pull. So then including just a statted little framework of like, hey, do you want to play outside the space a little bit? Like, here's a easy framework. So then, like, off jump, a player can, like, assess if that's a decision they want to make. Because I think that is the fun of a lot of those types of things of, yeah, you can do this. It's going to be a little harder, but we definitely can do this. I think that is a fun gamble to put in a player's head. And honestly, as I'm thinking about this, I think there is a thing when it comes to how tabletop works, kind of by necessity with how turns operate, that makes it feel very like turn-based JRPG. I stand still and I attack, or I at least I have a brief window where now my character is moving, but everyone else is immobile.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about this as I've been very slowly fleshing out a character who's going to be a martial artist in our upcoming anime game, is like, in a tabletop game, when you're thinking of playing a martial artist, the image you might have is like, yeah, we're fighting, but it really is like, all right, I make this attack, I punch, I kick, I don't take damage. When instead, like, you watch a martial arts movie and it's like trading blows, like bam, 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 like they're constantly fighting, and then like the one blow slips in guard, and like that's what does the damage. And,
Yeah.
like, just that little shift in framing, because as much as I love I love playing a martial artist, I can't Jujutsu Kaisen jump a guy. I can't do a Gojo Wing Chun. Like, I can't get that feeling in tabletop because at worst I'm like, all right, I punch, and like, this is how much damage I do. and then we kind of just then like, oh, and they punch you. Oh, I blocked that though. Instead of picturing like in that mind's eye like a big battlefield zooms in and like two martial artists like dueling just the middle of a battlefield, and you're like describing the trading blows, like immediately incentivizes a player. It's like, oh shit, okay, I'm gonna describe like a whole little combat moment here.
Yeah, and that's another subject that I... Did you mean to put a comma there, Devin? I think you did. I think you meant, I don't know, comma, we got that feeling in Monster of the Week, lol.
I mean, we definitely had a lot of moments like that.
I mean,
because in a narrative game, that's how you get like the fun out of the combat.
That's a different conversation. That's inverting from narrative back to tactical versus tactical to narrative.
I'm pointing out a reason I think there is a lot of that issue of tactical game combat doesn't feel very narrative.
Yeah.
Because it kind of starts to feel like I'm playing an RPG, I'm activating ability, I'm attacking.
Yeah.
Where, yeah. When that's like I think a big issue in a lot of times of tabletop, where even something like AC is something you gotta start adding in narrative that your attack almost hitting wasn't just because the enemy has a thing and they just raw deflected it with their breastplate. It's also because they are a skilled fighter and they're parrying you and defending. It is like an active fight you are having.
Yeah, and that's another point I was going to bring up is contextual gameplay. It's something that's not well written into tabletop in general. Contextual gameplay means, that it's not necessarily about the static battle grid, but instead the circumstances of things in the scene that might be able to generate effects. So, for instance, you could describe, and funny enough, I was going to bring this up when we did Anima Combat, because in Anima's book, in the law books as well, it does mention that attack rolls aren't just singular blows. They are, flurries of blows or like mixes of feints and everything that get you there. And then it's the finisher or the main strike that you're rolling for, or you're just generally determining by that course of action what your overall effectiveness with an attack roll is, Contextual narration, both in and outside of combat as well, can create these really interesting effects where, you're using feints or you're striking at an enemy's guard like you're using like a mace and you're striking over and over and over just to try to overpower the enemy's guard because you're using a big bulky weapon, and then when their guard finally breaks is when you try to finally like nail them with your mace. And how a lot of this can be used to make your games more narrative and tactical simultaneously is, okay, like I swing my weapon over and over and I'm just trying to break his guard down before I make my final strike here. And like, I'm just taking step by step, pushing them back inch by inch as I'm being overpowering their guard, That's something you can do to narrate, okay, and then you push the enemy to the edge and you knock them over, Or maybe it's later you're like, okay, I'm going to try to weapon break. I've been hammering on them all combat, so I'm going to try to break their weapon. And in Anima, the GM was like, okay, I'll increase the breakage of your weapon, because the way you've been describing it all combat, you weren't doing that necessarily to gain effect at that time, but because you kept making attacks and because the enemy is blocking versus dodging, or because your attacks have been very effective up until this point, the GM might give you different benefits. And so a system that can help, or even like a blurb that can add context to a mechanical system that can describe scenarios, that can be like, all right, your players can do additional things. Here's a chart of additional things that could possibly happen if, you know, in prior scenes they set it up, or an ally set it up, you know, all these other kinds of moments. And what this does is it makes combat feel more fluid. It makes combat feel like what your attacks are matter, and how you're describing them matter. So context is really important, and I feel like it's a lost art in TTRPGs in general, because the best things in movies are all contextual narration that happens over the course of normal actions that the characters in a movie are taking, but are contextualized by like how they're doing things, where they're doing things. You know, that's how the good guy always gets the drop on the enemy, because they didn't realize that they're now standing, you know, the hero's standing with their back to a large barrel that they can then turn around and slash and cause a huge, you know, deluge of like wine or whatever onto the enemy.
Mm-hmm. It is it is one of the things that I'm excited about with Anima, because it is one of the systems that I think feels the most freeing to do this kind of shit in, where it feels like the game is pushing me to do it. Because one of my favorite fist fight kind of fight scenes in a movie is Mission Impossible Fallout, a movie that is surprisingly really good. But like, there's a fight scene in that movie that takes place in a bathroom. It's like Tom Cruise, Henry Cavill, and then some guy that they're trying to steal some data from. And it's one of the sickest, most like mobile fight scenes in a movie. Like, it's super fluid. The entire environment's used, because like in something like Pathfinder, the idea of, all right, with my attack, like I'm punching this guy, and then like I grab him by the throat and I throw him into a bathroom stall, like breaking the door. That's a very specific action. You got to set that up. You got to do all this. It feels like Anima allows me to do something like that if I wanted to recreate that scene in like a really brutal one-on-one. Because also, I feel like Anima builds it too, of the idea of that's missed in so many fight scenes. Good old impromptu weapons. There's a whole archetype for it in Pathfinder, but like I cannot picture with that game's framework as easily like another part of that fight scene. You like fall under a sink or something, and you see a pipe that's been broken, so you just rip it off and like swing up at a guy approaching you. I can picture doing that in Anima way more than I can in Pathfinder.
See, I can picture it in Pathfinder, but it's only because now I understand how to run it, right? In Anima kind of is a strange game, because it feels like it should be a tactical game, but it's a game that cannot exist on a grid system. It's impossible.
It's too insane. Like, the reason I think that is because, like, in Pathfinder, I have to opt in if I want to get really good at those impromptu weapons. Then I make the decision of, I'm on the ground, I'm in this position. Okay, I have these abilities I can then really utilize. I have to make that immediate justification in my head of, do I do more damage with like an unarmed strike or with like a weapon? Sometimes it does hit because I've made too good of a martial artist. Oh, I just do more damage with my fist. And then you have to go through like a lot of that. I think Anima sets things up because of the fact this game can't function on a grid. If it has anything, the map is just there to help people like know who's alive, and like roughly if like something has happened where someone could roughly be in an area. Anima maps are suggestions, not like, okay, I move 30 feet this direction, I do this thing. It's just a representation of what's active.
Kind of, because there are rules for how far feet-wise you can move based on your character's speed, and they even have a free move technically in a full move, because full moving can be an action. We'll see a lot of that in next session, because we're probably gonna deal with a lot of that next session. But yeah, it's the problem with Anima is it's all so kind of weird and granular and janky that you kind of just ignore a lot of that kind of stuff to make things just better and make sense and not get overly like too in the weeds of it. But no, so this is like exactly one of those contextual things, and I think, and Alex has mentioned this many times before, but I think the biggest handicap of all of this is the players worrying about, is what I'm doing optimal, and is what I'm doing better, damage wise than not. And this is just a big crippling aspect for most TTRPGs, not even just tactical games. Because at the end of the day, it's an RPG game. You're building your character to do certain things really well. And so you're going to want to do the things that you're really good at more than the things that you're not good at, because that's how you've designed your character, and it makes a lot of sense. But in a lot of movies and everything like that, characters do have their strengths and get to shine in some moments, but characters also have to deal in moments that they're not prepared for, that they're not very adept in. You have the weird fight scene where the computer geek has to defend themselves, and they, from someone attacking them like in their server room or whatever, and they have to flail and run and dodge and try to do everything they can to get away from the enemy, or they use some ingenuitive thinking to like get one up on the enemy. And it's this idea of optimized actions that has ruined tabletop for a lot of things, especially Pathfinder. Because I can tell you, the things people talk about all the time are not about how to make the game more fun or interesting. It's how certain combinations of characters and builds are just objectively better than others. And I would argue they're not, because everything is contextual, Yeah. Even in like a normal run game currently, being a really good fighter does not make you good at an investigation. And the investigation probably matters more than actually fighting the killer,
Yeah, like that specific type of scene you mentioned, that is like a really fun moment to play, not as like a standard combat too, where you can use like the framework of some of the combat rules, but have it be, again, kind of like a really interesting narrative hybrid. Like these are a series of challenges and puzzles you got to deal with in a moment. Like I'm picturing jumping between like in a heist, and like there's a hacker character who's like, hey, I'm almost in the mainframe, and then one guard finds him, and you have like that moment, still trying to get this thing done, but I also got to ward this guy off, and it's not played like a, all right, roll initiative, his turn, my turn, his turn, my turn. Like that flows really well and still uses combat mechanics.
Yeah.
It can still be really sick. It's also the reason last week I brought up Brennan Lee Mulligan, because there is that idea of like, oh yeah, just don't take an optimal action, that do something fun. It's like, yeah, sure. I mean, that's always an option. I like being narrative, like that totally flies. The thing is, in those games that Brennan runs, he's really, really good at rewarding non-standard actions, because it's something in interviews he said he finds more fun anyways. So he incentivizes it a lot. So while his players, who've said the statement I'm quoting from, are people who would take the funny unoptimal action, like regardless, Brennan makes it more viable and you think about it more in his games, because you know you're going to get rewarded for your effort.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word, or the key words there, rewarded for effort, I think is what people should be considering more, and how games should be designed more. Is a player really shouldn't be just good at a thing and that be like their whole thing, because it makes for very boring characters and very boring moments in game. One of the best things when you're watching a movie and you're watching someone who's really good at a thing is to watch how they do it, shows like Burn Notice are always super interesting, and Psych are also really interesting, because there's a lot of technical aspects to some of the things that the characters are doing in those shows. They're manipulating psychology, they're, thinking on their feet, all this other kind of stuff. And it would be very, very boring if the character, like in Psych, where the guy is like, I have a psychology degree, can I use psychology to trick them like this? That's very boring,
Yeah, instead of what that show genuinely is, which is one man with a good deception score yes-anding his way to solving most problems.
Well, that he's
Like,
also just really, really smart. Is
he is.
the point of Psych? Is
He's that archetype of he's genuinely smart, does not apply himself in most situations, and like I that type of character who's gotten by being quick-witted and attractive, and he is smart. He just doesn't like doing it because there's a lot of childhood baggage there.
well, there's that, but
I
like
adore that show so much.
yeah, but like he understands people's psychology, and like that's how all of psych works. Is just he's intentionally doing things to fool people because I can't even remember the premise of why he got in as like a psychic detective.
He saw it on TV while he was like hitting it off with a girl. He saw like on TV real obvious evidence that the police fucked it up. Was embarrassed to say he's a good detective and just lied once that he was psychic because that's the type of guy he is. He's a compulsive liar sometimes. And then Sean, after that point, was told, well, yeah, if you're not a psychic after this arrest, technically you did something illegal. Because that's not due process for evidence. And he's like, oh, fuck. Uh-oh. And so he doubled down.
Interesting. But I mean, it's like he's a detective, right? Like
he's a private investigator, essentially, that has a good relationship with the cops there. So they kind of let some things slide.
So, it's all based on just how he does it, and even just the deceptive parts. Like there's aspects to it where it's just, can I roll to deceive? No, that's boring. Describe for me how you're doing it. Convince me, because at the end of the day, it cheapens the TTRPG experience when a player's only reason for making a roll is that they're good at a thing, and that's it.
When also, I mean, it's hitting the fun comedy of those moments that you can play into, of like, yeah, you lied your way in the building, you're now posing as this thing, and now very briefly at least you have to blend in, like, oh yeah, you totally blended in, like you perfectly blended in as this construction worker. Problem is the foreman's here right now, so get to sawing. You acted like you were like a 10-year veteran in this business on this job site. All right, do it. Which then leads to like, all right, let's play with this like little sequence, see how well I can blend in, and like, oh shit, I know I can't blend in. I don't know this skill. How can I mask it? Is another fun problem to be given.
Yeah, and it's in those kind of moments.
If you play it out,
it's in those kind of moments that you can earn advantages for later things as well. Like your construction worker is like, okay, shit, I need to pretend, I'm gonna take one of those like stud finders, and I'm just gonna go over all the walls, and just be like, oh yeah, I'm looking for studs, boss, all that kind of stuff. But then you could pocket the stud finder. Maybe that's helpful later, or other tools, or you could be like, all right, I'm sawing a log, I'm measuring the wall, and I'm sawing this thing, and the foreman comes by and sees and just like, yeah, sure, and moves off because he has no reason to doubt, but maybe that length of wood that you cut off, or the spare length of wood that you have, might come in handy later. Maybe you need to use it to prop open a door or whatever. These are things that wouldn't exist if you didn't describe it. And so these are contextual benefits that you're essentially leaving behind because you're just relying on a dice check to get you through the scene. And so there's a lot of situations, and this kind of drifted away from combat, but there's a lot of situations where the players would benefit more from just describing things. And even if they're not good at a thing, being not good at a thing can still give you major benefits if you're just creative enough. And that part, creative enough, I think is one of the sticking points for a lot of people. Of, it's all well and good, we're talking about contextual storytelling and narrating a scene and all this kind of stuff, but there's a lot of people who are just not comfortable with that, or who just don't feel like they're good at that kind of thing, and so they just don't. They're not good at talking, so they're like, hey GM, can I roll a persuasion? I'm not good at arguing, so can I just roll a persuasion? And while that's fine, and you don't want to pressure your players to do things that they're uncomfortable with necessarily, it if you are serious about tabletop, if you want to play more immersive games and have better experiences, then consider that it's going to be bad at the beginning because you're bad at it, and you will have to learn to get better, which means working on the skills and doing it more. And I guarantee the more you do it, the better you'll get. You feel like you're not creative, practice being creative, you know? If you have a good GM, they'll guide you, they'll help you, they'll offer you hints and tips and everything like that. Like, if you're feeling frustrated, that's completely normal. But understand that it's like learning any other skill, especially a skill that you're not naturally gifted in. You know, you're going to struggle and squirm and get stressed a little bit. And just remember that it's a game and everyone's there to have fun. And if your GM is pushing you to be more descriptive, it's for your own good more than anything, because it makes the game better, more immersive, and you become more interactive in the game. And, you know, you do it enough, eventually you're going to feel like you have a mastery and where you can do things in the game that you didn't even know you were capable of doing before. Get these contextual, you know, benefits in combat, like I mentioned before. Eventually you might get to a point where you can be like, yeah, I'm going to play an Indiana Jones kind of character, you know, who is not a warrior, not a fighter, not, you know, coming in multi-attacking, all this kind of stuff, but with quick wits and the use of his weapons and everything like that, and his knowledge of combat scenarios, you know, can make do with a lot of things and use a lot of things to his advantage to great effect, where you can be as good as a fighter without being as good as a fighter.
Yeah, it's a thing where, on the other hand, it's good, like, to have those options open for players, because there's those moments sometimes where you're like, ah, fuck, my character knows this thing more. Having the lifeline is very important.
Yeah,
but it is a skill we're still working on, because it's the difference of you're playing like your first face character, and it would be a thing where you should be approached, is this something you actually want to do, if every single option to face you ask for, like, the GM, like, ah, shit, I'm blank here. It's like, okay, is this like a play style thing that you're struggling with? Is this something you want to opt into? And when it's like the occasional bait, we're like, ah, fuck, I had something, I lost it, I feel like my character could stick on this train of thought, can I get a little, like, lifeline? It's the same way with any other skill. A character might be, I mean, I played this, like, a character that's really good at battle strategies. I'm looking out, I'm like, I'm definitely worse at this than my character. Is there anything I can, like, that jumps out to them being an expert in this skill? So then I, the player, am not an expert at this thing. It comes in degrees. It comes in degrees where it's a lifeline, not a full thing you do.
Not a crutch.
Exactly. It's something that you should still, like, try to get on your own. Yeah, then, like, the other aspect of it, I think, that immediately helps is matching energies on both ends. That's, like, as a player too.
Sure,
the GM is giving you some energy of, if they do that, they're building up a combat scene, and they're like, the GM's describing an enemy coming at you, doing this thing. What should happen is a player going, oh, okay, let me match that. Let me hit you with that too. Immediately, the fight can become a lot more dynamic. Just matching energy. The GM does something like, even the GM does a slightly, like, a out of the box, non-standard combat action that opens to the player. Oh shit, okay, let me try this. And vice versa. If a player is trying to play into this, the GM hitting the same aspect works really well. Because the worst thing on either end, as a GM or as a player, is trying to go for that, like, some fun narrative flair, and then the other person, GM players, like, okay, they stand there, they attack, roll to 15. Okay, anyways, next turn. But immediately demoralized. Like, oh, yeah. Shit, okay. That always sucks. So that's another tip for people out there. Match energy, and you'll immediately, like, it'll grow in yes and.
Yeah, and the thing is, as well, the GM is like the referee, but the GM's another player at the table. If you're trying to, like, work in a scene and you're trying to bring that energy in, don't be afraid to be like, hey GM, I'm trying to do this, here's the vibe of what I'm doing, and let them know kind of what your course of thinking is, and that gives them a lot more opportunity. Funny enough, communication in a social game. Don't be afraid to confront your GM a little bit, be like, hey, you're phoning it in, I'm trying to do something cool here. Though that can sometimes lead into the player thinks an idea is really cool and wants the GM to yes and it, and the idea is just doesn't work doesn't work the way they think it does, or doesn't really, like, you're just gonna run into players who think a thing works in a very specific way and it really doesn't. We had this in my wife's game where we had a player who wanted to kill this NPC and the rest of us didn't, and it was a fire that was happening, and so we're all like, okay, we can't deal with him now, we're just gonna put him on the floor while we deal with the fire. And the player's like, good, yeah, then he'll die of carbon monoxide poisoning. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. And they're like, yeah, carbon monoxide is heavier than air, it sinks and everything. It's like, yes, but fire and smoke specifically, the carbon is in the smoke, which is rising due to the heat. And in a fire, you're supposed to be low to the ground. And they would not think otherwise, no matter what we did to convince them, even posting links to actual sites. They're like, nope, being on the ground nearing a fire is bad. And it's just like,
yeah, you're supposed to. I mean, smoke inhalation will get you first. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a thing. It also takes a while to do that, and it also, in that moment, little carbon monoxide poisoning versus smoke inhalation. That's the thing that'll get you. It's what gets people most times, not carbon. That is an aspect of why I am against sometimes going full realism in games. Because there's the aspect of like, we're gonna do some carbon monoxide poisoning to this guy, where it's like, okay, one, that's not exactly how this works, but two, this is a game, man. I don't know. Like there's times where we can have the realism of like this aspect of safety or how the world works chemically and all this. I'm not gonna start playing out every single building of my fantasy world having a magic carbon monoxide detector, because that's something we legitimately have to think out. To some degree, it's like, this is a story of a fire happening, so it's applying to some fantasy logic and fantasy rules that you would in like a movie fire, because they're not worried about that in a movie fire. They're worried about like the scene and the things going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were just talking about. We were just like, we don't want him in the smoke, we're putting him on the ground and we're moving on so we can continue with the adventure, rather than doing what you probably should do in that situation, which is take the guy, drag him out, take him out into the fresh air and go from there. We're just trying to move on, but like,
exactly.
But the thing is, and this kind of leans back into the prior point you're making, where the player might not be as smart or charismatic or whatever as the character that they're trying to be. And the real key to all this is kind of fake it till you make it. As long as you're earning the role, it doesn't matter if what you're saying really is meaningful, as long as it's not completely illogical. You can't. There has to be some level of suspension of belief, but there has to be some level of belief in the suspension of belief. Like, you can't. A player can just be like, oh yeah, I'm like your battle strategist character, for instance. You could just be like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to use the King's Cross maneuver. You over there and you over there, and we're going to try flanking and everything like that. Flanking is not a very advanced combat maneuver, but you can make it sound better by adding on like a known strategy, or making up like, oh yeah, King Harold used something like this in the Battle of Nines, so we should do this and that, whatever. Like, you can bullshit your way through a lot of smart talk in a lot of games. And for charisma as well, most the time that, well, first of all, charisma is an energy thing more than it is like what you're actually saying and doing. So all you have to do is just portray the image of a character who is confident in what they're saying or doing, and that will typically get you where you need to go. But it's all about just like, how do you, when you think of a charismatic character in a movie, how do they act? What do they do? You know, everything like that. Because the unfortunate thing about tabletop is there are players who are just genuinely really smart or very charismatic or whatever, who can really live these things out in game. But everyone else, we have to fake it till we make it, more or less.
I think a genuinely a good avenue of trying is like, I think it's good to be very in mind of where your influences, your taste, and like what you enjoy is, because if anything, it can give you a really good lens on trying to do something. One of my longest played characters was a very charismatic bard. The way I consistently portrayed him being charismatic, I just fucking emulated Sean Spencer from Psych, which is why it's funny that it was brought up as an example. I just emulated him because his entire vibe fit what my character was going for. The full-on, like, just make shit up, say something very blatantly dumb, put people off guard because he's just acting goofy and kind of childish in a moment. And that is like a disarming tactic. There's the other lens where you can then add some extra layers of depth, because another aspect I really like about Sean Spencer is that use of like comedy as depth to hide what you're feeling. It's my favorite tiny detail of Psych if you really pay attention to it. You can tell what Sean is feeling based on how mean his jokes become. Whenever that character is stressed out or angry or upset, his jokes just become really mean-spirited. And that's such a tiny little tweak that you can do. So just emulating something you would really enjoy, playing into it, adding your own twist to it, it's just a really beneficial tool. And you can say, like, yeah, I mean, I'm straight up, this character's based on this and this. And as long as you're playing it fun and not just, hey, guys, this is my OC, Virgil 2. I have Yamato Neon, and it's just better. Like, that's boring. But if you make your own character and they act a bit like Virgil because you're playing into that archetype of the character doing anything to seek strength, and let it evolve over time, you're going to find some strength in doing that. You're going to learn things as you actually do it. It's a good tool to have in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, inspiration is just the core of media in general. Like, everything is inspired by something. A painting can be inspired by the sunset, you know? So nothing exists that isn't an inspiration of something else. A really good example of a dumb person doing, you know, like, doing a very difficult skill in their own unique way that is somehow believable to the readers. If anyone has read Mistborn Era 2,
yeah,
Wayne is a really, really good example of how you could just kind of bullshit your way into describing a character who has an eclectic skill of being a master of disguise. Wayne describes the thinking of people. He understands people, and so whenever he tries to get into a role, a persona, he describes typically how these people are, though if you realize in the books a lot of the time, most of the time he's always describing a person going through a really rough time or just struggling. Like, he tries to empathize through what he views everyone is going through, which is just having a really shitty day a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. He also likes to put on the hats of people that do certain jobs.
It's a physical manifestation of like a role you take in the world. Is like often the way he puts it.
And nothing of what he does makes any sense. It makes Wayne sense, you know. But he's so good at it that even the Khandra, who are designed to take people's places and to be like some of the perfect actors in the world, are like, how the fuck is a mortal doing this as good as a Khandra?
Yeah.
And
it's that aspect of when you have that just raw charisma, where another thing that happens with Wayne is sometimes you're thinking about my character's super charismatic, so everything is like flowing great, every statement is logical. Man, if you say something with enough confidence, people will just believe you. That's something Wayne does. He like says a thing, and a person can, if they don't know Wayne, will just be like, "Yeah, huh? What?" And like by that point, you're already gone. Like you've said something like in passing. You had that moment. There are people in this world who are really good at talking a lot without saying anything, but you feel like you learned something. Uh, Sometimes you just learn how to say something very matter of factly when it's just horseshit. It's a way of expressing it, and there's a lot of different ways of expressing many different aspects of people in tabletop. If you're trying to play a role, charisma is just a very fun example because it really is just talking.
It's about vibe. Charisma is mostly about the
Vibe.
energy you portray rather than the words you say. Like Wayne, he just says nonsense all the time, but he gets away with it because he's Wayne and he's a goofball and he's real fun and all that kind of stuff. So if you ever feel like you're unable to accurately portray the character that you're trying to portray, just try to fake it. Because again, this is one of those scenarios where, yeah, you probably are going to suck at doing it in the beginning. But the more you do it, the more you get into these characters and try to speak from their positions, the better you will get over time. And again, like all this whole conversation is leaning into, this will make for a better tabletop experience. Because if you were to ask me what is more fun, everyone sitting around a table asking for dice checks, or everyone trying to get into character and describing the scenes and trying to earn their dice, I'm going to say the second is more fun. Because when a scene has more context, there's just more to interact with. There's more things to do. Even as a GM, I prefer when my players are actively telling me how they're doing a thing or what they're saying in a conversation. Because if I want the world to react to them, I have to know how I'm supposed to do that. And if I don't have context, I can't do anything. And so the world ends up coming out as simple as the things being said to me, you know? So it's, I'm leaning back into combat, which is the color of today's chat. It's really important that if you're concerned about the meta, if you're concerned about optimally, should I hit with this weapon, should I hit with that weapon, consider that if you're playing in a real contextual combat scenario, most fights, even in real life, aren't won by proficiency of skill, but by happenstance and chance, more often than not. You get two warriors who are very skilled at their craft going up against each other. The difference is typically circumstance and what it's going to be. And that can't exist unless you add circumstance to the scene. You add the context in which circumstance can exist. And like the biggest benefit and why players have the advantage and shouldn't worry about necessarily the meta of the situation, the GM is not going to be necessarily looking to exploit context as much as the players are. The GM is going to play the enemies like enemies are oftentimes described in a movie or whatever. You know, they're not the quick-witted ones. They're not the ones trying to do things. Maybe an enemy every once in a while does, but more often than not, the mooks, the mob, they're just going to attack the players in the best way they know how. And it's the players who get to abuse the scene. They get to use the context. They get to do all this kind of stuff. You know, in that brawl in the bathroom where you get knocked down and you see the pipe and, you know, you think, oh, maybe I can hit and strike the enemy. Well, you could argue they didn't see that coming. And you could say the cost was you were knocked through a fucking sink last action and took damage. So you could be like, hey, GM, can I hit the enemy with this pipe and make them off guard? You know, and boom, that's something that the GM is like, oh yeah, that would totally throw someone off, you know, and the off guard might just be better because it makes you more accurate and more likely to crit, you know.
Yeah, it's a moment that that is a good way to work with cost, make fighting dynamic, because the part that would kill that type of sequence is like, GM, can I do this thing? And like the same exact scenario. It's like, well, okay. You can. First, you have to make a check to remove the pipe. Then you have to make the interact action to grab the pipe, and then you swing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's moments where you gotta, where you do just need to sidestep some of exactly how the game would arbitrate something and just keep the flow. Because it's the fun state that you can get into by having narrative elements in your combat. Is combat becomes a flow where you are narrating everything, you are rolling dice, but it's not I activate such and such ability. It's describing the thing you are doing, maybe tacking on at the end, and here's the ability I'm using. But it becomes that flow of perfect tabletop immersion. You're in the fight. You're not just throwing abilities at each other. It just becomes a really fun flowing scene. Same like the fun of some big skill contests being done. It's not about like getting the proper amount of successes. It's going through a situation in the background. There's a mechanic uplifting it. It's also not even saying that to play a narrative combat, you have to play unoptimally. You can introduce a lot of those elements and still make those same decisions. Like, you can have that, like, I'm dueling somebody, like, we're both knights dueling with big old broadswords, fighting. We're both making the tactical decisions you would. But with a shift in how you're narrating it and describing it, immediately becomes a lot more, like, gripping. Rather than, like, oh boy, the dice rolls. Anyways, next turn.
Yeah,
That part gets a little boring.
And more especially, contextual implements are supposed to be added in addition to the standard combat. You're supposed to be playing combat essentially standardly with added context until you can contextually do something in a scene. So, you know, me saying this isn't, all right, your builds don't matter, just tell a good story. It's your storytelling really matters. So if you're doing something your character's really good at, you might as well set up extra things for your character to do to enhance the experience, or to even give you some cushion in case something goes wrong. You're a really good warrior in a situation, but you get disarmed and your weapon goes flying across the room. Then what are you gonna do? You know, rather than panicking, being like, well, shit, my build is gone because my weapon is gone, then the context up until that point might give your character things you can do in that scenario that's not good for you, but you know, that tension is a big part of combat.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm working with this next Anima Boy, because I'm gonna have so much fun with the key system and not get absolutely busted with it. But I like the aspect of Anima's key techniques because it's fun to build yourself a toolkit of like some like cool like options in combat. And I think the key system is so open that you can also make really easily give your character some side non-pure combat stuff that they can do that aren't full optimal. Maybe they're more situational, because if you know how to make the key system, you can make a really fun ability that isn't a major sink of your resources to create. Because, man, I'm making so many fun ones. I already feel like my boy is gonna really take you up on that offer of you have to seek alternate versions of power and find other ways of leveling. I feel like they could be a person that just does break into like an office somewhere at like a university and like tries to steal some research from somebody. And there's so many little upgrades, like, okay, this character is going to be opting into these types of things. What kind of powers do they get? What kind of options do I take?
Yeah. And also, just so you know, you can't use limited attack and limited defense.
Yeah, I can't use that for unarmed. I was very sad. Only because I had a concept of two types of attacks where I was like, oh, this would be really fun if the separation was this attack only works on hands.
No, sorry, that's not what I was talking about. The it's the additional attacks or whatever.
Oh, that one.
There's additional attacks and additional defenses, and there's a limited and non-limited version, and I'm removing the limited versions because they break the game.
They do. They genuinely do. I thought you meant the because of course the easy cheese is the ability is only tied to a certain weapon.
Yeah.
And unarmed doesn't count for that.
Yeah.
Like, damn, I wanted like The two ideas I have is I have an idea of turning his fists into cutting weapons by like mimicking the fusion of a star and like creating like energy blade, and then increased gravity on his kicks where he just kicks you and it increases like the strength that you go flying at.
Yeah. No, yeah, just those two, because it's like,
Yeah.
that's how like the gun and the Frost Collier stuff got out of hand. The other version, I'm not saying no multi-attack, but the other one is just more expensive, and I feel like overall balance is a lot better.
It is more balanced. I completely agree with you. Like, like I was already not going to take that because of the experience that it just becomes super broken. I was like, I'm just gonna not do this part.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of the key abilities a lot more, of having like a couple, I spend this key to do an ability, but I really like the abilities with key that are essentially flat upgrades and like alternate stances and a persistent buff that you activate at a cost. I think is really fun. That's the aspect I'm playing into more.
Yeah. I just wanted to, since you were mentioning making techniques, I was like, just make sure you don't use these because they're broken.
I'm glad to hear that that part's been changed, because that is one of the big issues.
It's literally the only thing that really was super broken, because just multi-attacking with no penalty is just absurdly strong, and it's only the only thing you can do to defend against it is to get multi-defense in the same way. And it feels really bad if I have to give a lot of enemies an ability just to counter your ability. So
yeah, it's not fun when something has to become extra hard because of one or two players, and then the rest of the party is like not at that level.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the only change, but everything else should be mostly, well, I mean, we're gonna see. We're gonna have to bang all the dents as we go, but
we'll find some as we go.
I'm sure. It's anima. That's just how it is. I have a Google Doc of my homebrew going as we speak, so we'll get there. But yeah. You just built to ruin enemy accumulation. Well, not all enemies need accumulation, so I guess you're fine. There was a tangent I saw for a moment, but then I talked about anima rules and everything went out of my head. It's how weird how much that game just absorbs all my attention.
Yeah, it yoinks it. The idea of all this, I think too. I'm happy we push back on it a lot. Is the idea that there's like a line in the sand where something becomes narrative or it becomes tactical, where I guess the tactical end, like there are combat systems that just straight up aren't tactical, and that's fine. Not every combat needs to be crazy tactical. Not every game needs to be that same level of complication and like just raw tools it's giving you. But the existence of tactics does not remove the existence of a narrative. It's just, how do you spin it? I think it is harder for a lot of people, and has been given probably. I think a lot of the people who are super like anti rules, I think a lot of it comes from having a poor experience with it, where you have that really unfun moment repeatedly where you're trying to play into it, and then a GM is maybe too focused in running something very by just running it. We're going to go through this combat. It's going to take forever. We have to just keep going. Or shutting down a narrative explanation because that's not how the rules say. Where people then are like, you know what, fuck it. This type of play doesn't do this to me. Where I can like explain and role play out without all these roadblocks. Where it's an important skill I think you got to have in your toolkit if you're trying to be narrative in a tactical game. It's knowing when to sidestep some things, knowing how to flow things, and the big one is knowing how to have some of those mechanics working in the background as these frameworks to lift up a scene, so we're not all just improvising at a table with nothing like behind it.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, right, this is a style of game that requires skill on all sides, GM and players. And I like, me myself, I'm obsessed with this. We have a channel, we have a podcast essentially just talking about tabletop theory all the time, and yet for the last like 4 years, I feel like I've been running tabletop wrong because I forgot one of the core fundamentals, which is just make the story a part of the rules. Because I've been spending so much time learning rules that I forgot that part because games don't teach you that. And it's only just now that I'm coming back to it, and now it's the growing pains that me and my players are gonna have to go through to relearn how to play like I used to run games before, you know. And even in the past, I would, you know, be a little too granular, a little bit too by the book, you know, for some scenarios. And there's always going to be those scenarios where you just disagree with someone about how a thing should work or not. And it's something that's always going to, you're going to have to work. Like, there's no such thing as anything earned without strife to some degree. If you want a good game, you want a good gaming group, you're going to have go through that. And everyone's got to be on board.
Totally. Like, it reminds me of a conversation we had. I don't remember how long ago or what subject it was, but it was the example of sometimes when it's trying to be taken too far. The exact hypothetical we had where we're talking about was you're in an alchemy lab. The wizard shoots a firebolt at a bunch of at like their main workstation in hoping that it just explodes. And essentially, you're trying to sneak an insta-kill or a fireball. Like, that's what mechanically you're trying to do. Narratively, sure, this makes sense. Like, you see a thing, it might be volatile, you explode. And you have that roadblock of, I cannot balance-wise allow just spells to always work like this, because I can't have you cheat a cantrip into becoming, like, a full fireball. Or I can't let you cheat this very tiny resource into becoming an insta-kill. Where a lot of times that the roadblock is explaining, well, this actually wouldn't explode like this because such and such reason, and that's how you get into the debate. When I think a lot of times the important way to approach that is pause and be like, okay, I understand what you're doing. This is what you're asking me mechanically to do, which I don't think sets a good precedent. It's the same way of, we gotta work in game logic at times. It's like, you're in the woods. Therefore, sorry, pyromancer, if you use your spells, we have to play it realistically.
And you're gonna burn the whole thing down.
Fires.
Yeah,
and we're just gonna cause this. Like, that's not fun. That is, sure, that's probably how it would work if you are in a very dry forest shooting fireballs around. But like, game-wise, that's bad. And there's always those frameworks you have to put in place. Like, if you want me to make all the fire spells work exactly realistic, this is what you're asking me to do in other situations. I don't think you want that, so let's readjust. There's a thing you could do here that maybe gets an extra effect by utilizing the scene. Totally fine. It's the buck stops when you're basically trying to justify getting like an insta-kill or like something really busted for very little effort, because you need that cost there.
Yeah, and that's why I've definitely been hyping up the idea of earning your rolls. And like, this is not technically a roll, but like an effect, but it's more or less the same premise, where you can instant kill the boss if I feel like you've put in enough work to instant kill the boss. And I feel like in general in tabletop games, that's kind of generally accepted. You don't have to justify anything if it feels to everyone at the table that you've earned it, you know. The alchemy lab, you know, imagine a movie. They're fighting in the science lab, you know. I'm sure everyone can imagine some such thing. And usually what happens is the whole fireball, the chemicals, that's not the first thing that happens. Usually there's a brawl, maybe a pipe gets bent, or like something like that. Or maybe the character sits there and like realizes what's going on. You know, that would be a point where he's just like, oh, can I make a check? You know, yeah. Or like, oh, I realize that there's a burner behind me. Can I bend that pipe and aim it at someone and then light that with a lighter to get essentially like a flaming hands? Like, it's stuff where if it makes sense and the scene and the player's done the work and the scene isn't essentially like neutered due to this action, it's gonna be fine. It's
Yeah, like there's really fun options you can do. Like in that same scene, like immediately one of my thoughts was, you have that moment. You have that moment where a player's trying to do that. You say, hey, all right, you're on a good track, but you're asking me to do something a little busted, but you can definitely use the space to your advantage. Like those moments. Another funny option that would make the fight really engaging, way less tactical too, but just super fun narrative. Be like, okay, yeah, you know, all those like potions littered around, they can do something. You pull up a random table,
yeah,
and players and the enemies have the option to like either grab a potion and throw it or grab a potion and drink it. Random. You could accidentally drink a damage potion. You could accidentally throw a healing potion at somebody. That is the risk you play. It's a big old table, and it turns into like an alchemy food fight. And that sounds really funny.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? And that's a contextual scene, and that's also super not meta or optimal, but
Not at all.
it's fun. And like, that's the number one thing I would tell people who are worried about performing optimally in the scene is, if performing optimally in a scene requires you to sit and just attack the enemy over and over and over with basic strikes, because that's just what you've built yourself to do. If you think that sounds more fun than an engaging and dynamic combat scene where contextual things can happen, you can get one up over the enemy and everything like that, sure, maybe the enemy does die a little slower. Maybe it's a little bit more dangerous for your team. But the memories from that combat, I think, would far outweigh the optimal nature of the combat, you know?
Like, yeah, I like war games too, but yeah, I like war games. I like that style of tactics. It's just also that style of tactics is really fun when we're all investing into a sequence, playing and like making something kind of not standard. It's fun, and also like that element. There is the only thing I use TikTok whenever I engage with something. I just get a lot of tabletop theory stuff, and I hate most of it because it all is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the time, because it's here's a like asking for GM advice. This is a situation I have. One that came up just as an example was a player in a game, and this DM was having a struggle because the player wanted to play a pacifist that would actively heal enemies because they didn't like causing death even as like a group. So they would heal enemies and do this. And the struggle was that they were trying to find a way to work with this and justify it in game. And I go to the comments, and also the people on that little podcast are talking about this. All the responses are saying to handle this like in-game justifications and in-game like punishments or whatever. And like it was the time I broke where I'm like, why is nobody just saying stop and talk to the person? Just communicate. Be like, hey, at some aspect, this is a game, man. This is what we're trying to do. Like, can we come to some understanding of what you want? Because that is the way you solve every single thing and hurdle in tabletop. You stop, or after the game, before a game, you talk. Because in that example of the alchemy lab, I think there is an immediate solution you can do as a GM, as a player, whatever, having that like moment of, okay, what you're asking for is this. I see what you're wanting to do, broad scale. Let me give you a slight pivot instead of you can't do this thing.
Yeah.
And the pivot changes where it's like the alchemy lab, you can't just blow it up and do that. But that is something you can interact with. Immediately, like, okay, that is a that's not a roadblock. This is like I'm slightly off track. I'm being pointed at something else to look at. And it's the same action. I'm using the alchemy lab to do a non-standard action, or I'm doing extra damage, or I'm doing something. I'm just not getting the exact insane thing I want. It's a very handy tool in a lot of like yes and stuff too. Just having the having a slight redirect sometimes. It is it's just communication. It's always communication for everyone. Any fans of tabletop out here, just talk to people. Just learn how to like learn how to chat with your friends and understand where everyone's coming from. It's important.
And all this I think really boils down to making the funnest experience. Like, I'm not doing this as like a supremacist of, oh, you know, we're so good at telling stories, we can have these very intricate kinds of combats because we're really good at that, blah blah blah. It's more of, especially because I know, because I'm gonna be honest, a lot of the combats I've run over the course of the last few years, and a lot of the games I ran over the course of the last few years, just don't have a lot of super memorable moments. Like, there's some here and there, but there's just not a lot. And
I think the one Pathfinder one we did where we were defending that big school, that was a pretty cool one, but that's because it was really dynamic with everyone doing different things and different challenges.
yeah,
I remember that one.
and I'm sure there's a bunch that you just don't remember. You know,
There's a handful I don't remember. There's others I do. I remember a chunk of them for just being real fun. I also remember some older ones because you get the memory of the good combats and also the annoying one. Like, shout out to the one of the first combats we did in Anima, the fucking Fight Bro game where we're fighting the Arctic Chimera and the dice was just not on your side at all. So it took like twice as long to fight.
It's not even that. It was just the type of enemy it was is a dodgy enemy. They're an invasion enemy, so what they do is they don't have a lot of HP, they just don't get hit a lot. But that just doesn't feel good, you know?
It doesn't feel good. Also in the aspect that you were on fire. Like, you were doing really well defense-wise. That was another aspect of it. It was it's the swingy nature of dice sometimes, because that is a fight that could have ended in a couple turns. It didn't, because the dice decided to swing around, and then when they were in our favor, it died pretty easily, and we're just all like, ah, a fine fight. Fine. I like the Arctic Chimera as an enemy. I think they're really fun to fight against. It's just sometimes the RNG is like, fuck, man, god damn it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a whole nother conversation of players need to be just more okay when things are not going their way or things are difficult. Because, like, I know for a fact, if most of Brandon Sanderson's books were like an RPG game, that the players or the characters would be not having fun for good portions of it, because Brandon Sanderson loves to pile on the failure or the getting one-upped by the enemy, especially towards the ends of the book when everything seems desperate. And the thing that makes the books work is that's building tension, that's building stress, and it allows the players or the characters to overcome adversity. But people get so adverse to adversity that it can make it where you can just not have fun when things are just not going your way. And players need to understand that, like, the games are so weighted in their favor, and the GM is obviously on your side. So unless the GM is running the game bad, and that's just a trust thing between you and the GM, if things are going bad and you feel like things are just getting rough, you just got to play into it. You just got to play into the tension and the stress of the moment and make that a part of your story and make that fun, make that memorable.
The difference with it, I think, that is because I always have that, where I always have the, like, I trust you inherently to, you have a good sense of balance. The difference is between something like Brandon Sanderson and playing a tabletop game is, like, it is RNG sometimes deciding how things go compared to my own skill, my own actions doing a thing. It's like if I was playing Elden Ring and my dodge roll had a 50% chance to not work. That would be a fundamentally different experience of, like, failing in a game where I failed because of my own skill. It's like, ah, fuck, let me do it again. I can get better. When, yeah, if I'm fighting Melania and I have a 50% chance to not dodge roll and a 50% chance or something that my attack will swing through the enemy dealing no damage, immediately the game is like, well, fuck this, because the game's deciding I lose, is the impact of RNG. I think it is important to, like, free frame, like, okay, this is going this way. How can I play into it and, like, keep going with the scene? I think that's important. But RNG is a fickle mistress, and it also just feels rough sometimes.
I trust you. I don't trust your psychotic narrative partner, the dice. I
Yeah,
mean,
sometimes.
but see, here's the thing, right? In in the many years we've been running games together and everything, have the dice ever actually ruins anything?
I wouldn't say ruined, but
Exactly.
it doesn't still. It is the emotional difference of my character is performing poorly because the dice are rolling a certain way, compared to a character is performing poorly because I am not playing it skilled. There's the emotional difference of both.
Well, so here's the thing, though, is like, it's all about perspective, right? Because trust me, I understand. It doesn't feel good when the dice are just not supporting your narrative. But there's always ways that this can be represented, because at the end of the day, it's statistics. And the reason why I said, has the dice ever ruined anything? They haven't. What ends up happening is statistics kick in, and a scenario eventually gets better because statistically it's going to. The numbers just work that way. Is where it's if the dice are not in your favor, make that a narrative thing. You can add context even to failure, and that context might be able to be used to improve a scene later, earn some more story points later in a way. And like, I understand when it doesn't feel good because it feels like the dice are something out of your control, which they are, but what the dice are supposed to represent are the variable situations in which these things can occur. Because obviously a character in a neutral environment that doesn't have anything happening to them should gain a more or less the same result every time. And something that the dice are really bad at is, say your character is working on a training dummy, but then you roll a nat 1. Just doesn't make sense, most of the time. There's supposed to be a lot of things that the dice are supposed to essentially simulate. And
yeah.
And in these situations, when your character is rolling bad, it's not that you're doing bad. It can oftentimes mean that the scenario has been pushed against you to create the failures. You're running on the Arctic Chimera, you're about to hit, but it leaps at the last second and snow gets in your eye, or you were hit really hard by the last attack, and your character's actually just a little bit dazed, and you swing at the enemy, but they were way further away than you were expecting. Like, a lot of these things you can add context to that, one, will probably make you generally feel better about your character in that scenario, but two, can be, again, used to your advantage if you can tie them together. And like I said, earning dice checks and everything like that can be a thing where your character just suffers enough, and then the GM's like, okay, because of, you've obviously paid the price for what you're trying to do here, and it makes sense for what's happening. I'm going to just let you go ahead and do this check or whatever. It's because even in the Arctic Chimera fight, none of you got that close to dying at all. It just was one of those things where, like, people are very simple, and we're like, I roll the dice are bad, that didn't feel like it was in my control, so sad. It feels like it's out of my hands. But when you're telling a narrative game like this, you kind of have to have dice, because otherwise you have to play a video game if you want skill to be an input at all.
Yeah, it is an inherent thing with tabletop where, like, I mean, the Arctic Chimera fight was one of those bits where it was also like, it took like twice as long. So we were like, it felt like it should have, because the dice just kind of were working in that way. And that is true, like, definitely. I think with this new kind of thing we're going back into a lot more, I would find it difficult, even in, like, if we were doing our older Pathfinder games, to role play out of the annoyance that I can't roll above a 6 today. Because at some aspect, that is just emotionally annoying. Where it is my biggest constant where like logically I'll be in the moment like, oh, it's fine, we're gonna win, like there's this balance wise, like this isn't gonna be an unfair thing. The dice are swingy because on the other hand I could be rolling above a 16 this entire fight. It is never not fun to have a moment as a character and as a player where it's like, dang, I could have like sped up the combat if I just sat this fight out, just because of the effectiveness of what happened. Where in those games where we're playing just raw by rule, it wasn't as open because we were going very regimented rule-wise. Wasn't as open. It would have to be the little like platitudes we give ourselves of justifying why something failed. But sometimes it is just annoying when your dice decide I'm not going to be above a 5 today because that's just random number generation, and it's a thing you have to do in these games.
But like what I'm trying to say is it's not that that's not unfun. It's that you have the power to make it fun. You have the power to add more with it. And you know, sure, maybe the fight took twice as long as it should have, but if you're playing up the moments, if you're role playing the scene and you're really making that, like, maybe that's important to your character, maybe that frustration leads to some character growth, like, then that fight just gave you plenty of, you know, an ample amount of time to make that fight into something memorable, to make it something interesting. Like, there's the gaming aspect and there's the like lizard brain. Like, I understand as a person sitting out the table right now what's happening, that we're not hitting the enemy because we're not rolling super good. But the fun of tabletop is dressing, is making things have meaning. We tabletop doesn't mean anything unless you prescribe meaning to what's happening in the game. Otherwise, you're just playing a board game. And it's something where, again, like was the point I was trying to make before, you can do combat basically and make it unmemorable and just a thing you do in the game, or you can spend time to dress it up, to add context. And again, those contexts from all those failures, maybe they would have built up to something you could have worked on to take down the Arctic Chimera down even faster, you know? It just wasn't a thing that we were doing at the time. And it's something that you have the power to turn something like that into something more enjoyable and more meaningful in that moment that you just can't do in like video games and everything like that. So it's like, it's not even a real good comparison to tie it to like a 50% chance on your dodge roll or anything, because the game is accounting for things that in a video game just aren't a factor. And well, it could be a factor. If you try dodging in a swamp, for instance, then your dodge does kind of become a 50% chance because maybe you're not as fast as you thought you were and you get hit anyway. And that's kind of what the dice is supposed to represent. So it's all mental. It's all in your head. It's an imaginary game where we are playing with imaginary characters. It doesn't feel good to not be able to roll above a 6. I completely agree. But in a narrative, in a story, in a movie, that can be turned into something interesting. That can be turned into something fun. That can be turned into something meaningful or in-depth for the character. Maybe you're not thinking that at that time, and maybe there's just a situation where it just is not good to have that. But the point of the conversation isn't to talk about the niche scenarios. It's to talk about an overall like approach. And I definitely think that many people, you know, myself included, can work better with failure in TTRPGs, because if the game isn't fun unless you're winning, then you're just not going to have a good time at tabletop. That's just how it is. And that's a very blunt way of putting it, and that's not very applicable to most people. It's just you got to understand that like it's all the story. Frodo getting knocked over by a troll and Moria isn't like a good mechanic for the player who just got hit, but is something that added tension to the scene and made things more dire, you know, and that makes such a thing much more memorable. So, you know.
Yeah, like because I'm comparing it to moments where uh we've we've had this become a thing. So the one that immediately goes in my head is like playing Among Us, where I wanted to switch because I didn't find the mechanics fun, and on the other hand, I maybe hit like one or two spell strikes total of like the main class mechanic, and maybe not like exactly two, but it was a very small number because I remember missing basically constantly, and it builds to that point where it's like I can only add a little narrative flair of I'll get him next time, or damn, sun was in my eyes so many times until I'm annoyed that what is the point of playing a Magus if I am having not a lot of fun because of how this dice is working with me? I can just play something different. I'll play something different that's more fun because Magus isn't fun if I can't do the thing that makes Magus Magus.
Well,
like, that sucks.
To be fair, I don't think Magus is good. First of all, let me say this out. I don't think the Magus is good. I think its gameplay is particularly clunky. Not that I don't think it's balanced. I played a Magus, and I definitely know that they can hit really, really hard when they do hit.
They definitely can.
The thing with Magus is if you have such a valuable strike, you need to do a bit more prep if you want to do it like right. You need to make sure the enemy's off guard as best you can, have as many disadvantages as you can. You can't just try to spell strike every round because you're going to miss some attacks as is designed by the intention of the game, and it can be a situation where you're just trying. It feels like you're playing the game how it should be played. I go up and I attack the enemy, but what's not being said to you by the game and by the mechanics in general is spell strikes are valuable, so you want to ensure your strike the best you can, and that can be through setup or by working with your teammates or whatever. And I think that's just a thing that, one, that's a playstyle choice. You know, it's not I'm a cool fighter who gets to hit really, really hard once per round or anything like that. It's I have to play smart. I have to get the enemy disadvantaged so I can hit them with a really big hit. Because when you're a Magus and you're a high enough level, you can do 5 rounds of combat worth of damage with one spell strike. It's really, really good.
It was just playing that Magus. Because I know, like, I definitely try to do that. But also the Magus turn order sometimes, if it is very restrictive in feeling like it's set up to play your turn orders in a very specific way to do things. Which is just an indication that the class needs some fixing. But like, I do think I would have played that character longer if RNG was more in my side, because it became that really annoying point of I'm playing a class designed to do a thing, and through raw luck, I am not allowed to do the class thing. So why am I playing this? And like, this is not fun. So I want to do this thing, even if I play into it. Because I remember it was just that character Adrian or whatever. Like my luck as him was just so profoundly bad when it came to utilizing it. So it was just every combat me hemorrhaging resources for literally nothing. And we were playing it very tactically by the book. So only like in that moment, there's only so much I could do.
Yeah.
To try to build it up in this like upcoming games. I feel like, and that's the aspect we can play into it, we can build up to it. But like, that is a moment that sticks in my head as like a moment RNG ruined a character for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a very valid point of, because we were playing just by the book, it was kind of unsalvageable. Yeah, for sure.
I could only make the character arc for him so much of I need to get better, like this failure is building up, to where it just becomes like I don't, maybe he just sucks. Maybe the story ends that he sucks and like I switch to something different.
But like what I was talking about, again, approach, not necessarily like niche application, is the idea of, okay, but maybe I can turn these failures into something good, you know? And like, since we were playing by the book, yeah, I agree. That was a very bad experience, but that shouldn't have been how we both ran it. You know, me, the GM, and you, the player. We could have done more with that, and we could have done and made those things like it's like that coral explosion that you had a lot. You know, sure, maybe you miss the enemy and you create the coral or whatever, but maybe you could say, oh, so we're surrounded by coral, right? Can I back the enemy up into coral and essentially like make him off guard? That could be a thing that could be worked into a future success from a failure. You know, we weren't doing it at that time, so I don't blame you for feeling the way you did, for sure. I'm just saying, like, us now talking about it from our more experienced positions, all of it could have been done better, and it could have been turned into something much more interesting and much more fun. And, you know, like the coral explosion ability that you were using could have been turned into a lot of very interesting narratively tactical and contextual things to make, you know, enemies' lives hell beyond just what the game says the coral does, which makes a dangerous terrain.
Yeah, it is. It's a thing of going forward. I think it'll be a better. We have more options to ease it. Though I still think, just by raw luck, there's always going to be those moments where someone is just like, logically this is fine, but I'm annoyed that I crit failed like 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
I can only role play out of this much failure until like the person, start to get annoyed and like take a moment to like just be annoyed and like, all right, let's lock back in. Let's see what else we can do.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that even happens in stories. You know, a character does a thing, combat doesn't go well, and they leave that combat just frustrated, you know. I think that's a very reasonable situation for a fight that did not go your way whatsoever. But that, in turn, usually leads to more story. And it's just, the thing is like, what I'm saying is, we are playing dice games. We're playing games with funny rocks dictating how the story goes. So what do you do? What do we allow? Do we allow the dice to ruin the game for us, or do we try to make something better out of it? Being frustrated is fine, but there's, I believe, just better ways of approaching it. And in general as well, the whole thing that started this point was the idea of, you know, that players are just not good with failure. Not all player failures are dictated by bad dice rolls. Sometimes something in the story just happens that the players weren't anticipating, or things didn't go the way they thought they were going to go, or the enemies get one thing up on over them, you know. Stuff that happens, again, Brandon Sanderson is why I brought it up, because a lot of the times the characters didn't have context for the scene, or, you know, the enemies bring out their big weapon, whatever.
Or the other end where your GM crits multiple times.
Yeah.
Just right at the start.
Well, I'm talking about, I'm not talking luck based. I'm talking just general narrative.
Yeah, there's those I can flow better with the narrative moments. I think that is like a lot easier. In my head, the frustration purely comes with it is being annoyed that an outside force is dictating something, compared to me being genuinely very like, I'm fine with like failure in something that's skill based, because like, yeah, then I just get better at it. And then the one that no matter what, like I will be annoyed about and like just calm myself like further. I hate the turn 1 combat, like before you can act, character goes down.
Yeah.
I think that is just incredibly anti-fun. To the point where I think it is something the GM should not do. Like actively make that effort to not just completely kick the legs out of somebody before they can do anything. There might be some random narrative reasons why it could work, but I think it is incredibly anti-fun to set up a situation, the players are gearing up, ready to do something, ready to play their characters, and then tell one person, or maybe even a couple people, no, never mind. You sit there for a little bit. I think that sucks.
Yeah,
that can be done by raw luck.
Oh, we had something similar in my wife's game just this last week. An enemy, stupid little myconoid thing, myceloid they were called, because, you know, can't be the same as D&D.
Yeah.
they had an ability where they used spores on Devin's character and he failed the check. And so he had to act friendly towards that enemy unless he was attacked or anything for a minute, which is essentially the whole combat. And so Devin's character literally, I mean, to be fair, Devin did a really good job making the best out of that situation and making for some pretty fun moments.
I'll say that is a funny prompt for roleplay, and to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not doing combat. You gave me an RP prompt. All right, let's fucking run with it.
But it was bad because this is like a strong enemy. It's like a boss level enemy, and he was destroying our other frontliner. And Devin could only sit there and be like, "Why are you attacking my friends? What's going on?" the whole time. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, I understood why Devin wasn't having fun. That was just not a fun game mechanic thrown into that moment. He made it the best out of it, and I say, good job, Devin. The fact that he had to make the best out of it, though, was kind of bad. But, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't stop it from being annoying where you can't, like, you're given a thing, you're given a prompt, and then told you can't play in the space. Isn't fun.
Yeah.
And it's like it's the time when I was GMing, I flubbed. I had moments where I could have done that, where I roll and I see that an enemy was about to like nat 20, and at the level with the balance that would have just fucking killed somebody. Where I'm like, I'm gonna not make this a nat 20. I'm just gonna choose not to here. It's the one moment I'm always in favor of like flubbing dice rolls as a GM, just because like I think that specifically is so anti-fun.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where it depends. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's contextual. A lot of this is very contextual kind of conjecture, where
there can be narrative reasons why someone would be inactive for like the start of combat. There definitely are justifications you can build. I think unless it is very explicitly like set up and in that moment, I think then it's bad. I like any standard fight that sucks, is annoying. There's the fun tactical aspect of, oh shit, we have to reassess, we have to redeploy, but it still is just that moment of like, you have this combat, you have this mechanic, you have this thing, and someone is told they're not allowed to engage with it for a set of time. That is just annoying. If you have at least one turn where you can do something, that then like going down turn 2, I think is way better, because like that is better. You at least participated.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of scenarios. It's a very big movie trope of like a character you didn't think was gonna die suddenly just dies instantly and no one could do anything, getting headshot by a sniper, you know, kind of moment.
Yeah.
I think has a lot of interesting narrative potential in a lot of ways. But to be fair, this doesn't happen most of the time. Most combats don't have these kind of mechanics. I feel like a lot of times when game or like Adventure Pass or anything implement this, or even when GMs implement this kind of thing, they don't do it in a way that feels narratively satisfying, interesting. But I think a part of it as well is players are just not good at trying to make the best out of a bad situation. Devin didn't like that moment, true, but his roleplay led to some really funny moments, especially from another player, Booter, who was just annoyed at Devin's character during that scene and had a lot of like funny moments. Like that fight became so much more memorable to me than it probably would have, because Devin was in that situation and we had to work around it. And he didn't let it ruin his time. He didn't try to not have fun. He didn't stop engaging in the moment. He tried to make the best of it, and he tried to do something to make it feel good. And I feel like that's just a thing that can be applied to a lot more situations than players do. And you need to understand that like the whole course of an adventure, you're not going to always have the upper hand or even be on even footing. You have to overcome adversity. Yeah, but that's something you could come over, and you know that.
It's the aspect of running with it, telling the stories with RNG. it can have those moments, and it sucks, and it's fine to feel bad. The point where I think it is unjustifiable is, and like it is that moment you gotta reassess and lock in, is if you're intentionally acting in a way that ruins the mental of others. Like if you're
Yeah.
destroying the vibes by being negative about everything, at that point it's like, okay, you need to chill a bit. If someone's just like pissed because it's like fucking dice won't give me anything, dang dice, but you're still like in the game trying each turn, like that's something. That's something you can work with. And then it does have those moments where it flips back and you're like, fuck yes, hell yeah, I just immediately came back from this. It feels good. But like, you can't go out of your way to destroy the mental of the others around you. You can be pissed in your own head. Like that
Yeah.
that is fine. Because
Well,
I don't think I'm ever going to like not be pissed when it's RNG deciding shit is bad. Like I'm making the good decisions, but RNG decides I don't get to play the game today. I'll still play the game and I'll still try to win.
to be fair, RNG is always going to be the thing that dictates whether something bad happens at all anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
it should decide I win slightly more.
I think it's just something that like people in general are just bad, you know, with this kind of thing. And to some degree, it's kind of how much do you want to opt into something like that? And to some degree as well, it's also just how good you are at managing that kind of thing.
I'm also just bad at managing that. I can manage it fine because when I get mad for a very short amount of time. I get mad for like maybe like a minute maximum, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done being mad. But it's also like the thing that does hit my mental, even at like work and everything else, is those moments where you're like, I did everything correctly, but it's just the universe decide to fuck me today. Like I hate that so much.
And sometimes that's just how your character's going to feel in that moment too, you know. So I think
that's my character to feel cool. I just had work. I went to work and maintenance. I have the worst luck when it comes to fixing anything, where a basic fix is suddenly like a much deeper, way more complicated problem just by happenstance. Like I did my job correctly and I'm punished for it by luck. And I play my tabletop game and my character's the exact same way. Ugh, the worst.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just gonna happen, and that's just the nature of dice games and everything like that.
It'd be like that.
But like, it's definitely a thing of I would much rather play at a table with someone who could turn bad situations into good situations than someone who grumbles about a bad situation, even if they're not making things, you know, unfun for anyone else. Me as a GM, I don't want to see my players not having fun in the moment or upset and anything like that at all. So, you know, I'd much rather them try to turn the situation good and try to make the best of it and try to make it narrative than just to accept failure and move on, you know. It just, one's a more fun experience than the other. Not always practical, not always available, but, you know, if we're going to talk new situations and anything is possible, I'm just saying as a general approach to anything, if you're having a day where the dice are playing against you, then you know what? I feel like compounding failures can be a very powerful narrative tool too. And they can be something that can be turned into something more interesting. Why is your character suffering from multiple failures? What's going on? You know, a good GM will reward that if you role play into it. And even multiple failures in a row is a statistical quirk. It's not very common. So, you know, make the best out of it.
It is the thing of I'll be annoyed in the moment. I'll run with it. I'll play along with it. Before I do that, I will tap my dice hard on the table a couple times after like the second, third nat 1 in a row, or like the third time I rolled under an 8, like that day. D20 systems, man, the worst offenders at this specifically. That is always the bit. I'll always be like, yeah, fair. If you always have that one little thing of like, 1 sec, let me just do a tiny thing to pour out my my annoyance. All right, I'm good. Now let's walk back in. That is the better mental. If it is the mental of like going through it and be like, we're all gonna die, we're gonna lose this. This is the worst fight. Nothing's gonna work because I don't know. You rolled a nat 1 twice in a combat. Like, all right, you need to like look at the fight and reassess, look at the situation and reassess. It's not the end of the world. The game's gonna be fine. It's just luck was not in your favor for a few times.
Yeah. But we need to end. We went a little bit over.
Yeah, I gotta go to work soon.
Fascinating topics for sure. We'll probably bring them up again in the future. Let's see. I do believe we have Table Talk next week. We do, and then definitely not the next one. So
Definitely not. I'm out of time.
yeah, Thanksgiving is coming up. So one more Table Talk, and then we'll be off for Thanksgiving, and then we'll probably be back a little bit before the Christmas season comes around. I'll let you know the schedule around then. But that's gonna be it for us today. Alex, anything you want to leave us off with before we head out today?
Yeah, I just put out a video today on Clan Toreador for Vampire the Masquerade. A dang old fun video. And finally, I've done all the base clans of Vampire, and I have a bunch of other little side things to work on. And a possible video essay I might work on too. So go sub to my channel. It's Glue Boy. I do all the fun tabletop lore. Go check that out.
As for me, I have a baby. It's just gonna be the news from now on. I'll get back to working on things when life balances out. But even like last night, my daughter had a bunch of nightmares, and I was just up a lot trying to soothe her. So we'll have Table Talk. We'll be running Anima Beyond Fantasy. And videos will come when my daughter allows, and she's growing up fast enough, so we'll see. But that's gonna be it for us. So I guess we'll go ahead and say goodnight.
Good night.
Good night.